anyway, Dan and Benny in the Ring is a podcast that everybody ought to listen to. As a matter of fact, I'm going to have Hotchkiss Featherbottom put it on my playlist because I don't know how to work that shit. But guys, in all seriousness, keep doing what you're doing. Keep plugging away. You can do it.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another edition of Dan and Benny in the Ring. I'm Dan Sebastiano, joined as always by the playa himself, Benny Scala. Benny, how you doing, buddy?
Dan, I'm doing great. And you know, this is actually a baseball podcast disguised as a wrestling podcast. So my Yankees are 3 games in front of the O's, heading into. They have a crucial 3-game series. I think it's starting a week from today. And you know, to me, this is baseball at its finest. You know, the pennant run, the last couple of weeks of the season, 2 teams neck and neck. Then it just happened to be our teams.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I wanted to wear this today, a first for me to first, of course, to symbolize the round in which the Orioles are going to get eliminated. So
I don't say that. Don't say that.
You know, sometimes you get unlucky. I mean, when you got three of your 5 starting pitchers and your starting closer all with Tommy John surgery, you know, your team's hurting.
Hey, you could have what's his name, Holmes, as your closer, so could be worse.
That's crazy. Well, Benny, I know you said we like to baseball disguised as wrestling, but we do want to talk some wrestling today. We've got some history to talk about. I know it seems every week, damn near, we're starting the show with talking about a memorial or a mourning or announcing a passing or sharing some thoughts on something, and we kind of wanted to touch base on sort of looking at life and legacy. We did it with Kevin Sullivan. We had a nice little tribute with Sid. We wanted to touch on, because unfortunately they passed away so close to each other. We kind of wanted to touch on the life and legacy of really just a prominent tag team. We'll get into a lot of detail there, but why don't you tell everybody, Benny, what's on tap today and who's joining us?
You know, Dan, last week I said we had 2 of our favorite guests on, which was us. But this week we truly have one of our favorite guests. This guy's done it all in the world of pro wrestling. Wrestler, referee, manager, promoter, and heck, he's even the author of a great book about my hero, Bruno Sammartino. And he is here to help us celebrate the lives and careers of Afa and Sika Anoa'i, one of the greatest, in my opinion, tag teams, if not the greatest of all time. And of course, I'm talking about the one and only Sal Corrente. Sal, welcome back, my friend.
Thank you, Benny. Glad to be here.
Well, we appreciate your time. I know we kind of wanted to touch base, and there's really, you've got a lot of obviously firsthand knowledge and the experience to go with it. I know you've told the story, including on the show before, but for the benefit of the listeners, I want to get you into that. So, how did you meet Afa and Sika?
Well, I grew up in Yonkers, New York, and a gentleman named Anthony Attanasio started a business, and I was working for him. We were friends anyway. We lived on the same street, but he started a refrigeration repair business, and like I said, I was working for him on and off, but he eventually got a call at a house not far from where he was living at the time and not far from where I was living. I wasn't with him, but he met a guy named Dominic Marcello. Dominic used to travel to Allentown and Hamburg every 3 weeks. And he showed my buddy all the pictures, and he knew I was into wrestling. And he asked him if he could bring me back to the house. And one day we went over there. He showed me all the pictures. You know, he had pictures of the Grand Wizard without his stuff on, which at the time, that was a huge deal to me.
Wow.
And, but, you know, in those days, I didn't even know where the filming of the TV was. When they announced it, they just said the State Athletic Commission. They didn't say what state, and I never had a clue where these things were coming out of. So I asked him, you know, where do they film this stuff? Because he said he goes to the TV every 3 weeks. And he said, Allentown. And I said, could I come? And he said, well, yeah, if you want to split expenses. And he went with a guy named Mike DeVanzo. Now, these guys had been very close to Afa and Sika on their first run through. They were always down there taking pictures. And the way they tell the story is Afa and Sika saw them taking pictures of them and stuff. Because let's face it, when those guys came around, they were kind of different and unique. New York really hadn't had anything like that. So they really stood out, and the guys took a ton of pictures of them, and they became friends. But by the time I got involved, Afa and Sika weren't around. Fuji and Saito were around, and as the tag team. And they always told me how great Afa and Sika were, but they weren't there. I mean, so we just hang around, and I was doing security on the back door in Allentown. But then one day, Dominic had started coming sporadically at that point because of his job, but Mike was going on a regular basis still, and he got a letter from Afa telling him that they would be the ones to replace Fuji and Saito. So, they knew when they were coming in, and we went down there, and he introduced me to Afa first, and Sika was in one of the other rooms at the George Washington Lodge down there in Allentown, and they came over, and we took some pictures and started talking. And, like I said, Mike was very close to these guys, so it was just natural. I was there, and because he said I was okay, that was good enough for them. And then the relationship just grew from there. To be honest with you, the whole thing's accidental. If my friend's not in the refrigeration repair business, who knows, a guy right up the street actually knows all these people. I didn't have any idea. I didn't know the guy. He didn't live far from me. I probably passed his house 10,000 times. Who knows who's behind that door?
Right. Yeah, I mean, wrestling is, almost everybody we speak to, how that got in, a lot of times just a chance occurrence, bumping into somebody that you have no idea what their connections are. But, Sal, I think when most people think about the Wild Samoans, they think about their runs in the WWF, where they won the tag team titles on 3 different occasions. But these guys have a lineage in the territories. I think they started in the early 70s in Stampede, and wherever they went, they won that territory's tag team championship. So I wonder if you could maybe just go through their history a little bit.
Well, yeah, to be quite honest with you, while they started up there in Stampede, we didn't really have a whole lot of discussion about it. The only thing I ever asked them was, did Stu try to get them in the dungeon? And he said never.
Smart.
It kind of made sense to me. Yeah, because you hear all the stories about guys getting down there and being tested, but nobody wanted to test them.
Yeah. I think they were in the Sheik's territory in Detroit. I believe somewhere. I think Vancouver. I think Gulf Coast, Southeast, Mid-South.
They went a lot of places, including the IWA. But of course, they were the Islanders there. I think they started out as the Anoa'i brothers, and then the Islanders. And the way Afa tells the story is Andre recommended them to the office. To me, to be quite honest with you, they came in a little too late. I think these guys should have came in when they were in their early 30s. But it's like everything else. It's not what it's who you know. And Andre saw them, thought they'd be good for the territory, and suggested they come up there. And they were still young enough, and they really moved quick. And of course, they seemed like they were impervious to pain. And Albano was the perfect manager for those guys.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And,
absolutely.
They wouldn't have fit with Blasio the Wizard. It just wouldn't have made sense. So, you put those guys together, and, they were believable. I mean, you look at these guys, and you just had to wonder, is anybody going to beat these people?
Yeah. So when did they debut, Sal, for Vince Sr.? Was 79 or?
I believe it was 79. That sounds about right. Now, keep in mind, I was nothing more than a fan. The story that stands out to me, and I told it, at the funeral, December 8th, I believe it is, in maybe 1980. I've lost, I'm not really clear on the date right now, but it's easy enough to find. My cousin Jim used to take me to the matches all the time. His car was broken down. I didn't even drive at the time. But he said, we're going to take the express bus, and a friend of his is going to meet us down there. I was the one getting the tickets. So I had a contact there with the guy that worked the back door where all the wrestlers went up on the elevators. So that's how I got my tickets. And we met the guy there. We went up, and, the tag match with Gurria and Martel against the Samoans was ending. It was last. And I was worried about the New York curfew. Sometimes the curfew was waived, sometimes it wasn't. It wasn't until later I found out that depended on how important Vince thought it was he willing to pay the extra fees? That's really all it amounted to,
Right.
paying the extra fees.
Right.
The curfew is waived, and it's not. So when it was all said and done, I'm watching the clock, and at 10:55, I think Tony Gurria, and I discussed this with him at the funeral as well. At 10:55, I believe Gurria came off with a sunset flip off the top and beat one of the Samoans in the middle. So we race for the exits, and when we come out of the garage, all of a sudden the announcement is made that at 10:55, John Lennon had been shot.
Oh, that's right. Oh, yeah.
Now, this guy, I didn't know this guy from nobody. But he was a friend of my cousin's. He was a Beatles fanatic. He didn't ask any questions. We just started heading right to St. Luke's Roosevelt. And I was there when they announced John Lennon dead on arrival. Of course, he arrived there around 11 something, and they didn't announce him dead on arrival till after 2, 3 in the morning, whatever it is. So it ended up being a long night. But me and Afa used to discuss that every year, the irony of that. Not only that, they were in the garden that night, but also that he was being shot at the same time they were getting beat in the middle. I didn't know too much about the Beatles at the time. I mean, I know who the Beatles were, but I didn't know John Lennon lived in New York, and I'd certainly never taken the express bus. But ironically, my cousin pointed out to me and said, "That's the Dakota. That's where John Lennon lives." This would have been like 4 to 5 hours earlier. I had no concept. I didn't know what the Dakota was. I didn't know, I was like 16,
Right.
16-year-old kid and didn't really have a clue about anything. And certainly stuff that I didn't follow on a regular basis. So it was just ironic that on that particular night, this screwball, assassinates John Lennon. The whole thing was crazy. But, that's a night that will always stand out to me.
Yeah, I think I heard it from Howard Cosell that night, actually.
Just about to say,
I think a lot of people
one of the most watched broadcasts of the decade. Howard Cosell made the announcement. That was December 8th, 1980, that John Lennon died.
Sal, if I can ask real quick too,
Absolutely.
Why didn't they get in earlier though? I mean, I think they debuted in '73, so they would have been right about 30, 31.
Well, look, who's, like I said, Andre recommended them. Who knows when Andre crossed paths with them? I don't know. I mean, they were beating around in the South, and they had that IWA thing, and who knows why somebody gets in right away, why somebody doesn't. I mean, there was no plan or plot.
Right. I mean, why didn't they start wrestling sooner than at age 30? What were they doing before that?
Well, I'm not sure exactly how old they were. Well, I mean, Afa had issues, and that would have prevented that.
Okay.
Can say these guys had a challenging life. I mean, they went from nothing to being, having worldwide reputations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's see. Quick shout out. I see a lot of activity in the chat. We'll shout some people later, and I know Sal will have some questions pop up. We've had a couple of thoughts. They excuse me. Actually, speaking of which, while we're still on the topic of the 80s, before we get back to the family, Will here, he asks if you got to see them in 82. They were on that insane tour whooping Buzz Sawyer.
No, I didn't see that. Well, I met them November 16th, I believe 1982.
Okay.
Whatever the day they came back to the WWF for the second run, I thought that was in 82, but it was November the 16th is the day they came in. And, I watched them on Georgia Championship Wrestling, but I didn't see any house shows. I remember when Afa was there, they had to go back to Georgia. They had the National Tag Team Championship belts with them. Matter of fact, the picture that I have with them, they're holding the National Tag Team Champions, and they had to go back and work with somebody. I asked them who they were going to be wrestling. They got back. And he said probably Tommy Rich and Paul Orndorff.
Okay.
But I didn't see any house shows. I was in the Northeast. Georgia wrestling was not, and I wasn't traveling to Ohio for any of those loops or anything like that.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, keeping with the family, I know this question will probably take up the rest of the show if we go into too much detail. But I do think it's worth the time. I know, professional wrestling's always been known as a family business. You have the Hearts. We talked about the Dungeon earlier, the Funks, the Von Erichs had just the movie last year, the Guerreros. The list goes on. Yet it really seems like the Anoa'i, Fatu, Maivia kind of connection sort of transcends everybody. I mean, it's really. You saw it with the hype for WrestleMania last year when The Rock actually displayed the tree and you saw the names in a really kind of detail. And according to the story, it all started when Peter Maivia made a blood pact with, excuse me, Afa's father, the Reverend Amatuana. And this is where Afa starts Maivia starts in 1950. So you're talking about a family tree that goes back coming up WrestleMania this fall or this spring will be 75 years. Can you kind of just sort of go kind of break down the family, give an overview of the Anoa'is and the family tree?
Well, I can't say that I can give you the family tree. What I can tell you is, especially after being at the two services, that these people treat each other. I can't be assured 100% of where the blood starts and begins, other than the obvious that we're all aware of. But I can tell you this: they all treat each other like their first generation blood. That's just a fact. Atta Maivia Johnson is kind of at the top of the list, and Afa's got a couple of brothers and a sister. Afa and Sika got a couple of brothers and a sister left. And these people are all extremely close. The family is extremely tight knit. As far as the wrestling business, obviously Peter started it. One of the funny stories, Afa, like I said, these guys, they came from a rough neighborhood and they were rough. And Afa started traveling with Peter. And, we laugh about this story. Well, we used to anyway. But Peter was working with some Oriental heel in San Francisco. And I don't remember who it was. It wasn't somebody that I was really familiar with. Afa told me the name, but I didn't really remember it. But, they were doing some sort of a deal where Peter was getting hit with the salt every night. And, Afa told him, he said, "Uncle, I've been paying attention. I'm pretty sure I know when this guy's going to throw that salt at you." He said, "I can run in and stop him." And, Peter said, "Look, just let me handle this guy. You watch." He said, "As long as I have up one finger, I'm good. If I put up two fingers, then you make your move." Afa was out there every night just begging for that second finger to go up. Of course, it never did. But, that was where it all started. And then, of course, in the Cow Palace, these guys got into a lot of fights there. And, I think they got in fights with Pat Patterson one night. And I don't think that went too well for Pat.
I would think not.
It was a huge Samoan thing there. And, of course, Peter is a hero to all these guys.
Right.
Then Afa got in the business, and I think Peter and Rocky Johnson, and I think a guy named Ricky Thompson, if that sounds right, trained Afa, and then Afa trained his brother, to get in the business.
Wow.
Well, let me kind of ask you to expand on that, because it's a story that comes up a lot, especially in recent, with both their passings. The story is that Peter Maivia kind of identified them based on their crowd reactions and the fact that they were legit fighting with heels and probably winning, as the story goes. I mean, they're not gonna admit that a tough heel just lost a fight to a guy in the crowd, but. Is that sort of one of those mythos that just sort of expands, or is there legitimacy to that it was like, hey, these tough guys in the crowd, like, you need to think about actually wrestling?
From what I understand, that story leans towards the truth. Yeah. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. Afa never told it to me that way, but from what I've heard here recently, that sounds like that was it.
So, Sal, I watched a number of their matches from the early 80s in preparation for this interview. And I hadn't seen their matches in a while, but I was reminded of a couple of things. That one is that, even though they were wrestling, say, at Hamburg or Allentown, I don't even know what the size of the crowd there. Was it even 1,000? But I mean, they could electrify a small crowd. I mean, you would never think, if you heard the crowd reaction and you closed your eyes, you'd think they were, wrestling in a huge arena. And the other thing is, for big men, they were amazingly quick and agile, and they actually could sell. I watched their match against the Strongbow brothers in 1983, and now I love Jay Strongbow, but I do not see him translating well into 2024 for a number of reasons. But I can easily see Afa and Sika in the ring in 2024. I was just wondering about how you felt about all of that.
Well, I mean, look, what age would they be in the ring in 2024? I mean, if they were young guys.
That's sure. What I mean. If they were in their prime.
Oh, yeah. I mean, obviously. I mean, they could do it. They could do it all. They moved like cats, for sure. And they were tough and rugged, and you really couldn't do anything with them. Yeah, I believe they could have been fine in any generation.
I like your point about, when you really think about it, Albano was the perfect manager, because I couldn't see them with the Wizard or with Blassie, and it was always Vince and Albano, and then you'd have the two of them standing right in front of the camera, and they had enough distance between them that you could barely see, but you could see Vince and Lou, and it was just perfect. They did that, and their facial expressions were priceless.
One of the things I'll point out to you is it started to become obvious to us. Look, the truth is nobody wanted to be in the dark match in Allentown and Hamburg, especially Hamburg, because TV was done. And if, maybe you were only on the first tape, pretty much be on your way home. Well, you're in the last match, forget it, and, especially guys like Blassie and Albano. They had a long drive and they wanted out.
Right.
Now Lou didn't necessarily have to stay around for the Samoans match unless he was in a tag with them. But it became obvious because people wanted to see the Samoans. It would almost not, I'm not going to tell you every single time, but so often they were booked. I pointed it out to him. Me and Mike DeVanzo did. Say, guys, if you're not in the dark match in Allentown, you're in Hamburg. And then the next time you're in the dark match in Allentown, because they wanted something that would keep the people in the arena. Now, the way they used to do it was they would say who's coming in the next 3 weeks. And one time, me and Mike, we turned around and looked at him and said, that's it. You guys are in the dark match again. And Lou was like, how do you know that? How do you know that? He said, did you hear the list of guys that are coming next time? Did you hear their name mentioned? They're going to be in the main event. And of course, if your name wasn't in that list, there was a very good chance you were in the main event. And that's exactly what it was. Is they announced the list who was coming, then who was in the main event. And it would really go on a pretty regular basis that those guys were booked in the main event. And like I say, these guys wanted to get down there. One time Lou was down there with the Samoans, and Blassie said, would you go down there and tell Lou to stop fooling around and let's get the hell out of here? I said, no, Freddie, I'm not going down there and tell Lou nothing. But yeah, nobody wanted to do that, but they were constantly there because, it was something the fans wanted to see.
One thing I really loved was the fact that I mean, back then the tag team titles were very important, which, now they kind of, I believe they give lip service to, but there was always that chance when you watched that match on TV, or I guess if you were there, that those titles were going to change hands.
Yeah, if they did it, of course, sometimes it was in house shows. But then they, if you ever tell you we're going to take you live to the Spectrum, we're going to take you live to the Garden, you knew you were being taken there for a title change. They didn't really do that unless it was for a title change.
Right. Okay.
Keeping with the, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Benny.
No, not at all.
Keeping with the tree, as it were, the family tree. It wasn't just family. The Wild Samoans also had a huge learning tree, as it were. AEW apparently copyright pending. And I mean, you look at their training center, Paul Orndorff, the Junkyard Dog, Michael Hayes, Luna Vachon, Bam Bam Bigelow, Sherry, Kidman, Batista trained there early before he went over to OVW. I mean, Afa and Sika also did some promoting. So it's kind of a two-part question here. One, you know, were you ever involved in any of that, an alum or just, you know, backstage? And then two, can you kind of expand a little bit on their school and the promotion stuff that they did?
I was involved in a lot of it with Afa. Sika was in Pensacola, and I didn't get to Pensacola much, so I wasn't involved there. Sika would come work for me or tag with me from time to time, but no, I wasn't involved in any of the promotion that he was doing. But I was involved in all of it with Afa. You know, I would help with the business. I would, as a general rule, after a while, start putting the finishes together for everybody and so forth while he was running things. So yeah, I did a lot there. It was me and him, and you know, of course, his family members would necessarily help out, but no, I did a lot with him until I left New York. Then, of course, you know, then I didn't. But those years until then, yes.
Well,
No,
quick.
go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say kind of a quick follow up. I want to circle back something you had talked about earlier about them getting picked to replace Fuji. You know, I'm looking through the chat here. It seems to be a kind of a general consensus, like you said, that was absolutely the right choice. But just sort of morbid curiosity, if they hadn't have replaced, like say they were to come in and they were Fuji and that team was still active, what would the plan B have been? Any idea?
Well, what I can tell you is this. Me and Afa got to the George Washington Lodge one time, and S.D. Jones came up to the car and said he had been talking to the old man, and he made it crystal clear that as long as he had the Moondogs, Fuji, and Saito and the Wild Samoans to cycle through, he didn't need any other teams. So it was strictly a matter of come in, you know, when you had your run, go away, you'll be back. Let's move in the next heel team. And the Moondogs had been there. Fuji and Saito has been there. It was time. But Vince, you know, we got the second hand from SD, but there was no reason for him up the car and say that. You know, the one story that I told, you know, at the funeral was I think Afa and Sika found their home when they did their first TVs. You know, Afa told me this story. I certainly wasn't there for it. But, you know, the old man gave them each $3,000, told them go home and have a good Christmas and come back and let's make some money. Now, they had probably never been given that consideration by any promoter in their entire career. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I think, you know, and then, you know, look, you got to agree. You believe in these guys. You're bringing them in. You're obviously going to run with them. And, you know, they've been beating around in these tougher towns and so forth. And, you know, I think that was a great welcome. And certainly Afa never forgot it.
Yeah. I mean, it's just so obvious the enormous respect you have for the both of them. And I know you had a lot of travels and great experiences with them. Do you have any good Wild Samoan stories that you can share? Were they? I mean, I know Fuji was the legendary ribber. They would strike me as being ribbers, but were they?
Yeah, no,
okay,
no, certainly not around me.
Wow,
no, not really. No, not especially this kind of crazy stuff that Fuji did. No.
Well, he was on the next level. I mean,
would they be the kind of guys in the back? I didn't mean to interrupt, but would they be the kind of guys in the back you knew you wouldn't rib?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I would assume that it would matter, you know, what kind of stupidity you were doing. I'm not a ribber, and the guy I worked with for many years, Rob Russ, and he didn't believe in that either. You know, many people do, but you know, they're certainly not the guys you want to test. I mean, that's for sure. You know, when I first brought Stan Hansen in one day, you know, I told him who I was and, you know, how I broke in, and all he said is, man, those are some rough boys. I mean, some really rough boys. And, you know, Stan's not a man of many words, and you know, really,
and he's no lightweight.
And lauding how tough somebody is, you know. I mean, we get along now and have for many, many years, but you don't really hear him talking about somebody else's toughness too much. You know, it was clear they had worked. You know, he worked with him and Ole, or you know, both of them worked with him and Ole down in Georgia. So I'm sure they had some good battles. You got 4 guys in there that were really raw boned and could go at it. I'll tell one of the stories that I told at the life celebration. So this gentleman, Rob Russin, who had the IWA and did a lot of things in the wrestling and boxing world. We were the first people to bring wrestling back to Australia in the early 90s as far as the American side. And him and Afa got along very well also. Well, me and Rob and Afa were going somewhere, and I don't remember where it was. Rob was riding in the front for whatever reason. Normally, Afa would be in the front, but he wasn't this time. Well, we get out of the car, and I'm one of these guys that when I park, I get out of the car and I go. Well, I'm walking ahead, and I turn around, and I hear Afa calling my name. Well, when I turn around to see what he's doing, I had slammed the door on his hand. He was reaching around, on the bar that goes in between the passenger seat and the driver's seat, and trying to lift himself out of the car, and I slammed the door on his hand. Well, I'm like in a state of shock, right? Because I'm looking at him, and his hand is in there, and I didn't move at first, and he said, "Sal, come over here and get me out of here." So then I started moving, but he just shook it off, just waved his hand and said, "Man, you're lucky I love you." And that was it. Rob told the story for years because he couldn't believe it. Of course, he turns around, he's sitting there watching Afa in the, with his hand slammed in the door. It's kind of crazy to me. I still can, to this day, I could see him just standing there calm as a cucumber with his hand was slammed in the door. He couldn't get it out on his own. Yeah, it was crazy.
I imagine, Sal, they had I would think they had a very high level of respect in the locker room with the other guys.
Oh, there's no question. Nobody, listen, these guys were tough, and you got guys like Haku and the Barbarian. These are guys, nobody pushed these guys. And they weren't going to. But they were also they were all very well liked. These are easygoing guys until you do something stupid.
Right.
Look, as rough as all of these guys are, the Barbarian, Haku, and the Wild Samoans are 4 of the roughest guys out there. You ever hear any stories of them hurting anybody? You ever hear any stories of botch moves and these guys were all scripted? See, that's the thing. These guys were pros. I can tell you, Afa's throwing more punches at me than I can count. Never felt one. You know what I mean? These guys made it, I wrestled a guy named Gorgeous Gary Royal a lot, former NWA junior heavyweight champion.
I remember him, yes.
And, he's one of the reasons I was able to have the match because this guy could literally work with anybody. He's one of those guys that can make anybody look good. Well, he used to say, joking around, he said, "Listen," because he wanted to make sure he didn't get hurt, of course. "Listen, you make it look fake, I'll make them believe it." And we were never booed out of one building. Well, the Samoans made it look real, and nobody ever got hurt. These guys were just so damn good at what they did. Now, I did hear Sika say one night, I'm not going to call out the guy's name, but he said, "I'm telling you right now, he's got one opportunity to go down on his own. After that, he's going."
Oh, if the guy didn't sell?
Yeah, some guys, some guys don't want to sell. And, if you come from the Ricky Morton school and the Tommy Rich school, which you should, these guys made a career out of selling.
Oh, yeah.
And the truth is, I love it myself. It's more fun.
The match I saw against the Strongbow brothers, they sold a lot.
They're taking. They don't have any problem with that, but when you're heels, you're not really selling for sympathy. You're just putting look. If you don't make your opponent look good, who the hell are you?
Right.
That's the thing. You want to beat somebody that makes sense. Now the Samoans were a completely different team though than the Valiant brothers. I talked about this with Tony Gurria too. When I first got involved in wrestling, I really liked the Valiant brothers to watch them wrestle. And Tony said it flat out. He said, "Those guys gave us the whole match and then they beat us at the last second just out of nowhere." And that was their style. The Samoan style is totally different. But they had respect for certain guys like your Putskis and your Santanas and guys like this.
Interesting.
Yeah, very. Speaking of interesting, obviously you you mentioned being at the services. There was a Michael Hayes told a very interesting story at Sika's funeral. I hope you remember which one it was. I was kind of hoping you could tell us about that.
Well, I remember it. I guess. How did you know about it?
Actually, Benny mentioned it to me.
Oh, okay. Yes, I guess I did tell Benny. Yes, it wasn't a very interesting story. They asked some of us to get up and speak, and Michael first, Kurt Von Hess's daughter Paige got up and spoke.
Nice.
They were all in the IWA together, and then I spoke, and then Michael spoke. He was talking about them working in Columbus, Georgia, and I guess the Freebirds, and Michael gave all the credit in the world to Afa and Sika for putting the Freebirds together. He said if there was no Afa and Sika, there'd have been no Freebirds. They're the ones that told me and Terry we should get together, etc. Well, I guess they were in the bar in Columbus afterwards, after the show, and they had been wrestling each other. Well, some loudmouth in the bar started mouthing off, and I don't remember exactly what triggered him, but Afa whacked this guy and he went flying up against the wall. Well, just one hand and boom. Well, turns out this guy was an off-duty cop. Now, after Afa hits him, Afa leaves the bar. Well, Sika innocently comes wandering in. So, when the cops got there, they're saying, that's the guy that did it. That's the guy. He didn't do anything. Wasn't even there. But, they ended up locking up Sika and taking him off to jail, and I think the Freebirds too. And Afa, I mean, the whole thing was just crazy. But you got to wonder what an idiot. Look, I'm a big fan of the police. My father was a policeman. I was a policeman.
Oh yeah.
Bottom line is this: what are you mouthing off to these guys for anyway?
Yeah.
And it was just that type of thing. I will tell a story about the night Wendy Richter won the title. We were supposed to go. Well, we went to an after party somewhere. I don't remember where it was. Then these guys wanted us to go to some club. Martha Quinn from MTV was there. Cindy was supposed to be there, I think, etc. And the WWE guys said we were on the VIP list or whatever. Well, we get there. Not only are they not letting us in, but they're being very disrespectful. Well, it really was not going well at all. And whatever the contact the WWE's guys had were not working out. So they were trying to use the Samoans name to get in. But like I said, it was not going well. Well, I started watching Afa. He's taking off his watch. Now, I knew it was only, a minute or so, and there was going to be a major problem there. And it wouldn't have went well for those people. But, of course, afterwards, it probably wouldn't have went well for us. Luckily, whoever, I guess, should have been at the door finally came to the door and settled everything and ushered us right in. But, later on, I told that story to Freddie Blassie. And this will just tell you the difference between Afa and Sika. Freddie said, well, Sal, I can tell you right now, if it had been the other guy, Sika, last thing he'd have been thinking about is his watch. He would have just dove right in, which is the truth. That's the difference between Afa and Sika. Afa's going to take off his watch and worry about that. Sika's not even going to give it any thought.
Yeah. they were going to get inside whether they wanted to or not. What do you think?
Well,
Ben?
I don't even think we cared about going inside. But now you're being disrespectful. Well, that's a whole other story.
This sounded like Sifa was about to channel his inner Ken Patera and get through that door, whether it was closed or not.
Yeah, it was not. I still, to this day, I just remember Afa doing that watch, and it wasn't cool. But luckily, the guy came at just the right time, so we had no trouble. Because this club was packed. Like I said, the MTV people were there. This was not the place to get into a brawl for sure. One time we were coming out of Madison Square Garden, me, Afa, and Lou, and they were literally turning my car over.
Oh, geez.
Not Afa and Lou, the fans, especially with Lou in the car. To be honest with you, I think me and Afa might have been fine on our own, but with Lou in the car, forget it. And it was a mob. And Lou finally had it because he knew the car was going, so he jumped out of the car. And you want to talk about the difference in those days to today. Well, when Lou jumped out of that car, these people all scattered. Today, that's probably just a confrontation. And who knows what happens. That's the difference between the early 80s and now. I wouldn't have wanted Lou to jump out at that time. Of course, they would have probably had to both jump out, but still, what really happens in a scenario? Those were the days where they ran away from the wrestlers. Today, you got some idiots will be hoping they hit you so they can take you into court.
Yeah. True.
Yeah.
So, right now in the WWE, and it's been for the past several years, actually, the Bloodline is the number one faction / storyline. And do you think Afa and Sika would be pleased? I looked up the family tree. It's mind-boggling how many people have emanated from this family that are Hall of Famers or main event wrestlers. Do you think were they pleased with the legacy they created?
Absolutely. They're very proud of all the kids. And you can see, you can feel all that. And then Paul Heyman, of course, is one of the guys that Afa worked with getting started, and he's obviously very invested in the Bloodline and is very invested in Afa and Sika, and we go back a long time. And this, what I told, the thing, protecting the business, the integrity of the business was very important. Afa, these guys were rough, and you know how idiots are. They want to challenge wrestlers, this, that, and the other. Well, anybody who challenges the Samoans is going to clearly have a big problem. If it just came down to fists, you're going to have an issue. Now, me and Paul maybe weren't built so much where we could protect the business the way they could protect the business, but they knew that we respected the business the way they wanted us to. Because otherwise, look, I was Afa and Sika's tag team partner on numerous occasions, whether an individual or in a tag. Let's face it, I was their most unlikely tag team partner ever. I didn't fit in with those guys, but that was just the relationship we had. Whenever I called and asked them to tag with me, they would just get on a plane and come. And I appreciated that, and we always had a good time and put on a decent match. The one thing I remember is the night that he said, "Sal, you're gonna go over tonight with the Samoan drop." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, you're gonna use the Samoan drop on OJ." I said, "No, I'm not." He said, "Yeah, no, you are." And I said, "Look, I can't do that." "Yes, you can. Don't worry about it. It'll all be fine. I'll headbutt him. He'll go into you. Just that's it." And I've never seen anybody outside the family use the Samoan drop. Maybe it's happened. I didn't see it. They're little things. They're just a few moments in time. But let's face it. Ultimately, I wasn't qualified for that. But we always had a good time, and it was just friends going out there and having fun with friends. Is what it was, and we tried to entertain people the best we could. These guys were the best, and they gave me these opportunities that, other than being their friend, I wasn't entitled to. You think in these late 70s, I'm watching these guys, and I'm thinking, one day I'm going to be in ballparks tagging with them, and I'm going to be in these buildings in different parts of the country. Forget it. Would have never been a thought in my mind. So yeah. I appreciate every opportunity that they gave me. We created memories that, as long as I'm able to remember, I'm sure I won't forget.
It sounds like they were very unselfish guys, though, from what you just said.
They were. Yeah, they were very unselfish. And Afa and Sika were both natural teachers. Now, they had different approaches, but they were both natural teachers. Now, when I was refereeing, Yokozuna came overseas with us. His first matches, he was called Rodney the Tank. And the first matches were over in Egypt. Now, as far as I knew, he had not wrestled before other than, training. And, this guy was smooth right out of the gate. And, you want to talk about the school. Well, in Hamden, Connecticut, the school was off his backyard. The ring was just up in the backyard. And we'd get in there and goof around. That was how my first overseas trip. We had a makeshift match in the backyard, and the promoter was at Afa's house. And, he told me to go in and referee a match. I don't remember, but it was probably Strongbow and Kurt Von Hess or somebody, but whatever it was, I just went in there and did it. Next thing I know, I've got a plane ticket and I'm going overseas.
Wow.
But that was the extent. They didn't really have a school, official school. until they went to Pennsylvania. And he trained all those guys. And if he believed in you, obviously he couldn't give you a job, but he's going to make sure WWF knew about you. And I'm pretty sure that he's the guy that recommended Ray Apollo to take Matt Bourne's spot.
Yeah, I was doing.
When that became an issue. But that's the thing. If they believed in you, first of all, Vince always appreciated that anyway. And he would come to Afa. Like one day I walk in the room, I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm trying to find the junkyard dog." I said, "For what?" He said, "Vince wants him. He's calling all over." Well, he couldn't find him, so he calls Afa to find him. One day he says, "Let's go. We're going to the airport." "For what?" "We're going to pick up Paul Orndorff." I didn't even know Orndorff was coming to Allentown. So next thing I know, I'm at the bottom of the escalator bringing Orndorff to his first TV in Allentown. These guys, were very well connected.
Nice. Well, the certain terms and things tend to get overused in wrestling and in discussions about wrestling. And one of them is people always say they want to make their Mount Rushmore, their whatever you want to call it. And really, Benny and I, we've had this talk before. We've talked to tag team specialists, and tag team wrestling's come up a lot on the show. And whether you want to use the term Mount Rushmore, whether you want to do ranks or not, anytime somebody assembles their greatest lists ever, universally the Samoans are somewhere on the top. If there was a Mount Rushmore of tag team wrestling, Afa and Sika would be on there. And I'm just kind of wondering, as kind of a closing thought, as it were, that here we are. I mean, it's 2024. You were talking about the 70s, where we're better part of, and into the 80s. We're better part of 40 plus years after some of these stories, and they're still just revered and respected and beloved, and they understand what they've contributed. So kind of, I hate to say closing thought, because again, it could take the rest of the hour, but like, kind of what is the legacy now as we look back and we've mourned them, we've lost them both, mourned them both, the legacy that the Wild Samoans are going to have in wrestling history?
Well, look, I think when people talk about these things like Mount Rushmore and who's the greatest, first of all, what's the criteria for the greatest? How does that all work? And, not everybody is schooled on anything more than about a 15 to 20 year window. Now, some people, of course, have been around and they've been loyal fans forever. But, when I see some of this nonsense, the greatest wrestlers of all time, look, what do you judge any of that on? What I say, if you want to look at tag team wrestling, it's teams like the Samoans, the Andersons, the Rock and Roll Express. These guys were on top everywhere they went and drew money everywhere they went. And that's just three names. But, if you want to take, what do you look at? I look at a team like Matt Bourne and Buzz Sawyer and tell you it's one of the greatest teams I ever saw. Now, they didn't have the right size and this, that, and the other, but these guys were unbelievable when they were young. But if we're talking about the only thing that really matters in this business, which is money, well, you've got teams that no matter where they went, they were put in a position that they had to draw money. I mean, the Rock and Roll Express sold out everywhere they went. You go to Memphis, the fabulous ones, Kern and Lane. I mean, there were times where they had to run the same building twice in a day. You didn't have all these big buildings in Tennessee that you needed, but they would literally have an afternoon show at 2, close out everything. Guys would, go eat or whatever they do, and then have to come back and they'd be sold out again that night.
Wow.
That to me is where it comes. But if you want to take a work standard, okay, well, I look at it. These guys were believable and never hurt anybody. Some guys are clumsy and hurt everybody. It just depends what the criteria for your Mount Rushmore is. If you're just looking for hype and pizzazz, okay, well, there's guys that could go on your Mount Rushmore. You have to look at certain wrestlers and see, because it's important, especially in your smaller territories. You're going to towns more often. You've got to stay fresh. Right. And then this is what Bruno did. It was very important. He was going to have to be in the Garden every month. Right. He was going to have to continually draw there. One of the things that I think, where you could put the Samoans and a Bruno in the same kind of category is, if you're wrestling me, do you have to wrestle my match? Or am I going to wrestle your match? We're the champions. We're the ones that are here. Are we going to try to make you adjust to us? Or can we adjust to you? You know, Bruno always adjusted to his opponent. And he always had different kind of opponents because people would get tired of the same thing. Well,
Right.
you know, that to me is huge. There were guys that would wrestle Dusty that wouldn't understand, you know, how to make Dusty shine. Well, that isn't going to get you anywhere. You know, who's going to be able to make it make sense to people, especially when they're seeing the same guy over and over and over again? You know, the Samoans could adjust to anyone's style. Like, you know, you talk, you know, when the Strongbows were doing their thing, Jay was at the end of his career. Well, Gurria and Martel weren't. Putski and Santana weren't. You know, these guys, you know, did what they had to do. I think that goes a long way. But when everywhere you go, you're on top, well, people hate you. You know, you go to Puerto Rico. I mean, Afa warned me. He said, look, man, when you go there, you know, I did a lot of refereeing there. They're going to be throwing rocks at you. They're going to be throwing spark plugs at you. Sure, yeah, they were. You know, and that to me, I think goes more of a long way. Is, you know, how are you adapting? How are you staying fresh for the fans? You know, you don't want to get in the monotonous position. That's the worst thing to me that you could do. If you're always adjusting to somebody else's style, does that make sense? Then what about limitations? You know, now wrestling Dusty Rhodes in the 80s probably a hell of a lot different than wrestling Dusty Rhodes in the early 70s. You know, what can you do where that's going to make sense? And you know, well, that I think goes a long, long way because the fans have got to be entertained. And if you understand that, I think that goes a long way. But ultimately, let's face it, ticket sales are what matters. You know, that's just the bottom line. When a belt is taken from somebody, it's because the territory is not succeeding with that person with the belt anymore, or it's just run its course. You know, let's face it, you don't keep people in the same territory necessarily 3 or 4 years, especially heels. You know, so you just got to look at different things like that. But I don't know about this whole Mount Rushmore business. But I know the teams that I like. You know, I know the teams that entertain me. There's a lot of great teams out there, but the Samoans got all these titles and went everywhere. And the truth is, other than when they first began, they were literally on top every place. So the promoters believed in them. Yeah, you know, and that's you know, to me that's what matters. But you know, then you get a team like the Rock and Roll Express. I mean, these guys couldn't even get to the bank to cash their checks. They were so busy, drawing crowds everywhere.
Right.
150 pounds, 175. I mean, I'm not exaggerating, obviously, but you know, in comparison, you know, how does that make sense? These guys are one of the greatest teams that ever lived. Well, so are the Samoans. You put those two teams together, it doesn't even make sense looking at them, right? But they understood how to succeed. They were given the ball, they ran with it. So to me, that's a great team. And Ricky and Robert are still going today. You know, so everybody has their own choice. But to me, the Samoans are one of the greatest teams that ever put the tights on. And there's just no two ways about it.
So one of the things I liked is the fact that they actually each were put up against Backlund, right? Did they enjoy doing that? And I mean, very believable matches.
Yeah, I was actually in the Garden. I think I really believed. I think it was Sika, but I wasn't. You know, I wasn't close to them at the time. I didn't know them, but I actually thought that maybe some flying headbutt that Sika did, maybe off the second or top. I don't remember, but I was like, I think he's got him. Of course, he didn't have him, but you know, I really thought that it was coming, and. You know, let me say this. I'm not going to say that they ever looked forward to it. You know, they were tag team wrestlers, and you know, I think they most enjoyed being in tag team matches. I certainly never heard any of them saying, "Hey, I wish we were in singles somewhere."
Right.
But you know, it was good. It was good for a change. You know. Probably for Backlund. I mean, Bruno would tell you the same thing. You know, there were times he wrestled guys, he didn't even feel they were qualified, but the old man wanted them. And, you know, would say, hey, look, I'm the champion. From time to time, I should just go out there and beat somebody.
Right.
And, you know, in these cases here, these guys are tag team guys and they're going out and, you know, you're giving your champion a win with guys that really are tag team specialists. But like I said, as far as did they really enjoy that, I guess if push came to shove, I'd say they would have probably rather been in a tag team match.
Yeah.
Can't argue with that. Well, Sal, I mean, you're just absolutely a wonderful to have on. I love it. Very complimentary. A lot of the chat loves hearing from you. You know, the general consensus is not only do you have great stories, but you're a phenomenal orator. So we always love having you on. We love hearing the stories, keeping things alive. This is, I feel, a very important topic to talk about, that give these guys the respect and due that they've earned through their life. Again, I thank you so much for your time, Benny. As we wrap up, any final thoughts?
No, I just want to echo what you said. I mean, you know, we've lost so many legends, you know, in the past couple of years. What do you say? You know, we're at the point in life where it's, you know, it's starting to take more than it gives us. And I mean, these guys just, you know, they go back. I mean, from their debut is 50 years, from Peter Maivia, you know, 75 years. And yet the hottest thing that on wrestling today is their legacy. And I just think it speaks volumes to how great they were.
You know, let me just add this, guys, before we go. You know, between the two services, and Sika's service was certainly more private and more contained than Afa's was. But the love of family, the stories that, if you're just a wrestling fan, that are hard, but, you know, the children in the family who talked about, you know, Sika came to all of my games and, you know, at the ball field and all this type of stuff. And the people that they trained, and, you know, they were natural teachers. Now, they taught in two certainly different ways. And to be quite honest with you, when I screwed up, and believe me, I screwed up, certainly not intentionally, but, you know, I made mistakes in the ring. And Sika would actually be the one who would be the more calming person and say, Sal, look, come over here. Let's talk about this. And a couple of times Afa blew his stack. Now, he should have blown his stack because what I did was stupid, you know, but the people that know them would probably tell you it would have went just the opposite, you know, but they took people in many cases who didn't have a chance and gave them a chance. And that doesn't mean they became big stars, but it gave them direction, and they taught them, and they you know, they gave them something to love when maybe they didn't really have anything to love. You know, my dad is a boxing coach and saved the lives of a lot of kids. They'll tell you that. He's still a boxing coach today. And in many ways, Afa and Sika were the same way. As much as these guys were great performers, a lot of their legacy is going to be family and the lessons that they've taught into all these kids. Many of the kids got up and spoke. Shane McMahon was at Afa's funeral, and he told a story that I had never heard before. Velvet Sky was there talking about the help Afa gave. Several others have chimed in. So to me, you know, I don't know if their legacy is really championships or worldwide reputation, or being teachers and giving back and paying it forward to everybody else. So that's what I'll close with. And thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you. Before we let you go and close up tonight, Sal, I know you're obviously you always are good to share some thoughts and stories. Is there anything online, anywhere someone can find you, or anything you recommend they look up?
Well, I mean, my Facebook page is there, but, you know, I wrote the Bruno Sammartino book, and you know, we've been lucky. I mean, that's a whole different story and how that all came about. But you know, we're lucky to get very good reviews for it. People seem happy with the book, and, you know, it's really not. It's a story about a man who became a wrestler, not a story about a wrestler. The adversity. I've had people read it that had nothing to do with wrestling. Some celebrities, Cindy Morgan, who was in Caddyshack and Tron, and Jackie Demon from General Hospital, who knew nothing about wrestlers, but these girls were friends of mine, and they read it, but they were all amazed by the story. So we always appreciate anybody buying the book. And if the Samoan story ever gets told, some of it's not even comprehensible. We did start going down the road of writing a book for various reasons. So we did not continue, but I've got a lot of notes that Afa gave, and I'm going to tell you, man, where these guys came from to where their life ended up and where their family is now with Roman Reigns and all the Fatu kids. I mean, these guys are adults, and, me and their fathers were playing in the backyard, and we were all 18, 19 years old. I mean, it's amazing where the time's gone. I don't know, but I appreciate the opportunity to speak about the book, because Bruno's book is one that a lot of people should read. When you talk about adversity, all these guys we're talking about tonight went through tremendous adversity to reach the heights that they reached, and isn't that the true sign of success, really?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, of course, for anyone interested, the book is Bruno Sammartino, the autobiography of wrestling's living legend. I know the copy I had when Benny sent me the link a couple years back was on Amazon. I'm sure it's other books can be sold. Sal Corrente, obviously, thank you so much. Your amazing stories. Again, the chat very active tonight. You guys guys and girls are always great. We appreciate it. So for Sal Corrente, for the player himself, Benny Scala, I'm Dan Sebastiano. Have a good night, everyone, and we will see you next time we're in the ring.